The American left and their media poodles have long held up New Zealand as the model for how to properly deal with a lot of things, including COVID. But anyone who loves freedom should take note, because the Kiwis have a terrifying new response to rising COVID case numbers. They're throwing people into quarantine camps.
If someone refuses in our facilities to be tested, they have to keep staying. So they won't be able to leave after 14 days. They have to stay on for another 14 days. So it's a pretty good incentive. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer. So I think most people will look at that and say, I'll take the test.
No leaving the camp until you're negative. The left's other COVID role model, the EU, is taking equally drastic measures. They're requiring government officials to use thermal imaging cameras designed by a Chinese company, the same one that provides surveillance equipment to the concentration camps that they call re-education camps for the Uyghur Muslims. Joining me now is Victor Davis Hanson, Hoover Institution Senior Fellow. Victor, are these the type of scenarios we're going to be facing under a Biden administration?
Yeah, it's frightening. I mean, here the virus started in China, it was spread from China, and now China is offering the West the methodology and technology of fascism to supposedly cure what they started. It reminds me of Crassus in Rome. You know, he had the private fire brigade. He pulled up when a fire was devouring a house, and he said, for a price, I'll be willing to put your fire out, but better yet, I'll buy it at rock bottom prices. That's what the Chinese, that whole technology and methodology, I guess, is seen in the West by. But it's also bizarre because we're not in an ascending pattern. We're having 1 million tests per day almost, so we're bound to have more cases. But the cases are mostly asymptomatic. They're more younger. The death rate is going back down. The therapeutics, medicines are improving. The vaccination is on the horizon. It's not the time to double down on this lockdown. And it begs a question, why are these people doing these things? And in the case of New Zealand, they have a nation of 5 million people. They've only lost, tragically, but they've lost 25 people. That's an astounding low number to throw away personal freedom. And here in the United States, whether it's Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama or Joe Biden, they've all said that this is an opportunity not to let it go to waste, as Hillary Clinton was explicit about it. They want to use the pandemic and the lockdown to recalibrate things.
Yeah, speaking of that, but that's why these polls showing that Trump is behind in Michigan, given what's at stake in Michigan, Victor, with future lockdowns, which you know they're coming. You know they're coming under Biden. They're setting the table for that if he wins. So they're going to lose their economy. The virus will still be there as it was in Europe after their lockdowns. So what do they get? They get a wrecked economy and COVID. So how would Michigan go along with this in any resort?
They're not going to. I don't think they're going to go along with it. I think another element. This has always been a class issue and Trump is finally doing a good job in emphasizing that. The people who are out there working and have small businesses and can't afford to avoid and do what I'm doing right now, telecommunicating, they don't have a choice. And they've been absolutely destroyed. And Amazon and Walmart and all these large conglomerates and people in the professions and insurance and law, high tech, they've done pretty well. And they're the people telling the rest of the country, you've got to lock down more. You've got to lose more money. We have to have zero chance that you're going to get infected. But these people, if they did that, all the people like us, where I am, in an isolated room, we wouldn't have anything to eat. We wouldn't have any fuel. Right. We wouldn't have any electricity. So it's really a terrible thing. And we're not even talking, Laura, about all the people who have died from missed surgeries that you've so eloquently had on your show, and spousal abuse, substance abuse. So it's really hitting the middle classes very hard. And I don't think they're going to take it, especially when these elites keep telling us that there's opportunities to be had in this crisis. Not quite as crass as Jane Fonda that said, thank God for the COVID crisis, but something near that they can recalibrate American freedoms and manipulate the First Amendment under the guise that we're all going to die unless you let them take control of our lives. Yeah, sorry,
I jump in, Victor, but in Europe, and this is a real quick answer on your part, in Europe, when people are standing up against the lockdowns, they're sending people in to call them fascist. So the people who are for freedom are now being branded as fascist and dangerous. and they're being blamed and shamed. Does that sound familiar? Real quick.
Yeah, it does. You go out and break the quarantine and you're either exempt or punished depending on your ideology and your political correctness. And that's what destroyed all confidence in the quarantine because it was unfairly applied according to politics and it was bankrupt.
Yeah.
Now, Europe's doing what we did. You're exactly right. It's familiar.
And New York state lawmakers are set to take on a bill which would make COVID-19 vaccinations a requirement for residents. One America's Caitlin Sinclair has that story.
New Yorkers have been hearing about this proposed legislation that would make the COVID-19 vaccine mandatory. We first heard about this over a week ago and no updates since. We believe it's sitting at the State Assembly, of course. What can you tell us as far as what this bill would essentially mandate?
Well, I know that this is, a bill that's right now in committee, and that there have been, in the recent days, there have been several articles written about it, and Assemblymember Rosenthal has introduced this bill, and what this bill would do is mandate that anyone who doesn't have a doctor's exemption to have the COVID vaccine. And this is very scary because this is basically taking away your individual human rights. And also, how in the world could government mandate that, in order to live in a state, you have to have a vaccine or you have to have any kind of medical, treatment of any sort in order to become, to be a resident of the state. It goes against the Constitution of the United States. It goes against the Bill of Rights.
Totally, absolutely. And now the people of your borough and your district, tell our viewers what they've expressed when word first broke about this.
People of Staten Island are really upset about it. And I'm sure that there are people of other counties that are upset about it as well, because we have seen government overreach, all in the name of, this pandemic, this emergency pandemic, which, by the way, has a 99% recovery rate. And while we watch on television, and in big tech and in the news media, that they tell us daily about how many deaths there are, how many hospitalizations, how many positive tests. They don't talk to us about the fact that there's a 99% recovery rate for this pandemic.
Right. So, Letitia, we also wanted to have you on to discuss another new bill that's floating around out there, which would essentially be able to force New Yorkers into a medical facility. This all if the governor's commissioners label you as possibly dangerous to society. Now, this would affect all of us if any future pandemic were to hit us. So what is this all about?
Oh, it's insanity. So there's a new bill out by Assemblymember Perry, and it is A416. You can look it up. And basically it states that if in a pandemic, if the governor will have executive orders and will allow for anyone who is deemed a cause of spreading the pandemic or spreading the disease, and their family or any others that they deem, they can remove you from your home and place you in a medical facility until the governor or the governor's commissioners deem you are no longer a health risk.
Wow. And there are so many New Yorkers right now that are unaware this bill even exists. I mean, how many more New Yorkers would this scare away?
It's the scariest thing I've ever seen, and it is against every right we have as American citizens. And I can't imagine that anyone would want to live in New York knowing that their rights can be easily stripped through this proposed legislation.
Well, Letitia, I know you've been doing everything to speak up, organizing rallies, events, and we thank you for educating New Yorkers, and thank you for your time today.
No, Sheila! Hey! Fuck you! No, Sheila! Fuck you! Hey! Don't pull him over!
Il peut plus respirer, arrête! Arrête, il peut plus respirer! Don't fucking do that!
Don't you fucking do that!
Okay, calm down.
Stay fucking here! Okay, we're calm. Don't do that! We're people! Get the fuck inside! Get the fuck inside!
Non, lâchez-les, s'il vous plaît, là. S'il vous plaît, les gars, là. Hey, lâchez-les, là. Ils sont trois dessus, là.
No, I'm gonna come out.
Hey, non, ils sont trois dessus, là.
Yeah?
Hey, ils sont trois dessus, là.
Fuck out! Get the fuck out in there! Jesus Christ! Ça va être pire, la taille. You fucking make things worse!
No!
Yes! What are you gonna do now? Stay there!
You have a shoes for the video? You have a shoes? You have a shoes?
Hey, c'est ça de là. Comment, genre? Hey, vous avez pas le droit de tirer quelqu'un de la maison.
Je sais pas qu'est-ce qui s'est passé.
Vous avez pas le droit.
Avez-vous des
Moi, je veux voir votre sergent.
Avez-vous des chaussures?
Non, j'ai pas de celui.
You have a shoes?
Non, j'en ai pas de celui. Donne-y ça. Attends, on toi, là. C'est même pas de mandat. Oh my God. C'est un mandat? Moi, je vais avoir votre mandat, vous vous retenez. Non.
C'est juste de collaborer.
Hey, c'est quoi? Vous m'avez tiré en dehors. On a sa caméra sur un tabarnak. Vous avez tiré mon fils.
Écoutez, madame, si vous avez un problème, le sergent il est en route.
Mais tant mieux.
OK? Vous n'êtes pas d'accord au travail policier, vous avez des recours, vous les prendrez.
Merci.
Après.
Close the door.
OK?
Close the door. I don't want to see those people anymore.